Stacy, welcome to Podcastina.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for doing the show. Has being a divorce attorney impacted how you look at love?
Intellectually, probably, but I'm getting married for the third time in July. My first husband, the father of my kids, is wonderful. My second husband was an alcoholic. May he rest in peace. And you would think as a divorce lawyer, I would give up on love, but I'm an incurable romantic, and I believe in it. I believe in guardrails and helping with that, and I believe in trying to disengage with respect. But I am a romantic.
That's good. I was hoping that it would be more of an optimistically flavored conversation because it can be a bit of a bleak topic, but I'm happy to hear that. And congratulations, by the way, on your third marriage.
Thank you. I don't even like to hear the word third. Got it right. I'm excited. This is forever, however many years we both have left, and I'm grateful and excited.
That's beautiful. Do you look at a marriage as a success, even if it does end in divorce? Because you hear some people say, oh, well, we did it for 20 years. Is that your point of view as well?
Well, even when I counsel clients and they're very despondent about getting divorced, you have two beautiful children or you built a business or whatever it is, I don't consider my marriage to the father of my kids a failure. We had many great years and we have built a family and we're still very close. My second husband, is a little more of a challenge because I know I gave it my all, but he had to figure out how to deal with his alcoholism. I couldn't do it for him, and I tried. It was physically really difficult for me, psychologically difficult for me, emotionally difficult for me, and I'm still dealing with that, as are my children. But as one of my cousins who's younger than I am taught me, bad experiences also make you who you are today. And I'm a better lawyer. I think I'm a better person. I know a lot about alcoholism now, which I'm trying to use not only in my practice, but I'm writing a book, etc. So as hard as it was, to use a phrase I use all the time, good judgment comes from experience, most of it bad. So I've gained from that. Another Stacy-ism is if you go through a bad experience and you don't learn something from it or benefit from it, it's just a bad experience. But if you have a bad experience and you learn from it and you better yourself as a result, then it's a positive experience. And that's the way I look at it.
I bet in a way it's actually helpful for some of the people that you're working with to know that you yourself have gone through a divorce in the same way that we wouldn't want a dentist who has bad teeth or a physical trainer who's out of shape.
So interesting you say that because many, many years ago, my then partner told me I should take down all my family pictures in my office with my then husband and my kids. Said people don't want to see a happy family. And I said, I don't agree with that. And I do believe I was a very capable divorce lawyer before I got divorced, but I know now in retrospect, I am a much better lawyer, divorce lawyer, having gone through it. I know how to walk the walk, talk the walk the talk, whatever that phrase is. And I am a much better family law attorney understanding alcoholism because it is counterintuitive. And I've had many discussions with judges and with clients, and I have an ability because of my experience to say things to people who are going through it, and they look at me like, wow, how do you know that? That most people wouldn't know to ask unless they've been through it. And I hope people don't go through it, but I have, so I'm going to put it to good use.
It's a great way to kind of turn lemonade out of lemons in that case.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Have you noticed any trends as of late as it pertains to divorce? Has it changed these days versus maybe when you first became a divorce attorney?
Yes. I speak in threes, so let me think of three things. One, because of first fax machines and then texts, and then the speed of computers, we are expected to move far, far, far more quickly. And we thought we moved quickly before. But that also has a downside because you don't have as much time to reflect. People react, they don't respond. That is not necessarily better. And we're expected to be available to clients 24/7, and that's also not healthy. Everybody needs to clear their head and get rest to be their best self, and that takes away from it. Two, I have seen dramatic changes in the law, but that's a whole nother discussion. Three, and I guess I'd probably say four, there's an increase in domestic violence matters. And in California, domestic violence is not just physical, it's interfering with one's emotional calm, at least in with respect to intimate partner relationships. So that's very broad. And there's also a lack of civility with between counsel. And that is, it's not a gentleman's profession the way it used to be when my dad was a lawyer. At least that's my observation, and it's very troubling to me. I just took 3 civility classes as part of my continuing education, and I'm trying my best to hold my head high and not get down in the gutter and really do the right thing. I'm not perfect, but I really strive for that.
I think if you don't set that precedent and you're getting down in the gutter, as you say, it's just going to encourage clients to also get in there with you or be more severe.
If I don't do my best, then I'm not setting a good example for clients.
Absolutely. And it's already such an arduous process. Even probably the best, smoothest divorce, there's still all of this potential for it to get just really dirty and contentious. And especially when there's families involved, like the last thing you want to do is be like, let's make this worse. Let's traumatize you even further in what's already a traumatic experience.
But yet parties, husband, wife, whatever, they generally pick lawyers who either match who they are or what they want the lawyer to be. People, if you read my book, Divorce, It's All About Control, How to Win the Emotional, Psychological, and Legal Wars, in chapter 4, where I talk about the different types of lawyers. And one is, somebody's gladiator. And being a gladiator to me does not mean all pistols and swords. It means being careful and calm and a fine surgeon. But most people think that being a gladiator means, you go in and you just mow everybody down. I don't think that's the right way to approach all cases. Sometimes you really do have to act like that, but in a gracious way, in my opinion. And one of the discussions I have with clients all the time is, you need to be aggressive. Okay, aggressive doesn't mean being nasty in a letter. It means trying to accomplish a goal with thought, etc. But some people just want nasty and want to go to court for everything, don't want to try to solve problems, and they hire lawyers that are just pedal to the metal for every case. I don't think every case is the same, and I try to look at it differently. And even if you have to try a case, you can be respectful to each other. It may be a very difficult issue, like a move away, like if one party wants to move out of the state of California with the children. That's really often hard to compromise. But that doesn't mean you have to be nasty in the process. And you may have to try your case, but you could do it with respect for the parties and respect for the lawyers, as opposed to getting in the gutter. That's what I mean by civility.
And at that point, it's kind of going to turn into something. You say you're still very friendly with your first husband. I imagine the more tumultuous the divorce, the less likely that there's ever going to be healing on the other end.
That is correct, unless enough time goes by and certain things like bring people together. But more often than not, if it's a knockdown, drag out, you're not going to be able to really get along. And that's a problem when you're trying to raise children together.
Now, I know this is a very nuanced question, but just in what you've seen, at what point would you say a marriage becomes unsalvageable?
When the parties have both given it their best shot. That's maybe overstating it. I mean, one person can give it their best shot and just not want to try anymore, even if the other party spouse is willing to keep going. And we all have different thresholds. One of the sadder types of divorces I've done, and I've done a bunch of these, where the parties still love each other, but they're just not a good match. How they want to live their lives, risk adverse, not risk adverse, how they like to spend their leisure time, how they like to live literally. May still love each other, and are friends, but are not a good match. And I remember the first time I had a discussion with a client about that. He was standing in my doorway crying, telling me that, and it really struck home. Sometimes people give up too soon, but who am I to judge? And sometimes people just hope that it keeps getting better and better, and they should have, walked out years before. So I don't think we can judge.
I'm curious if you're familiar with the work of the Gottmans and the Four Horsemen that they claim are the sign that a relationship isn't going to work out.
I've heard about them, and I know I have read it, but I can't bring it back to the forefront of my mind. I think somebody sent it to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, they did a lot of field studies, and I think the number is in the 90s as far as their ability to assess working with a couple and predicting divorce. And the accuracy rate, it's like 93 or 94. And I know it's like contempt, stonewalling. Oh my gosh, I forget the other two. I just was curious if it was something you came upon and if you've kind of gleamed the same ability after all these years to clock when a marriage is going down the tubes.
I do watch other people and think to myself, they're not going to make it. I do that a lot when I'm doing prenups. Mm-hmm. That was another thing. And over the years, I've done so many more prenups in the past year or two than I have in my 39 plus 40 plus other years. That's become more of a thing, I believe. And I have watched the interactions. I had one client who called off her wedding because of the prenup. Gave her a lot of respect. She had a lot of courage. But I've watched others where they've ultimately signed the prenup and got married, and I don't think they're going to make it. But I've also had potential clients call me, and I sense that or we talk about that they would really prefer that their marriage continue. And with their blessing, I will call the other side, meaning the lawyer for the other side, and say, can we, get these people into counseling? Will you talk to your client about it? And that's happened a few times. I've tried a few times. I've succeeded a couple of times. But if I think that it's possible, I would rather keep a family together. And I've had so many people call me for a referral for marital counseling that ultimately they stayed together.
That's great to hear.
Yes, you both have to be willing to put in the hard work and listen, and you really need a good therapist because a bad therapist could really do damage.
Absolutely. I'm curious because you said you can kind of tell sometimes at these prenup meetings, what is some behavior that you've seen during the drafting of a prenup that you would consider a sign that the marriage won't work?
If one party shows disrespect or disdain for the other, if the demands, and I use the word demands intentionally, from one of the parties or both of the parties, I think are unreasonable under the circumstances. Having a sense of entitlement, and just how to engage. And I'm like flipping through a deck in my head of so many examples of this where I was appalled at the way one of the spouses treated the lawyers in a meeting, demands in responses to a draft prenup that ultimately went away but it showed the entitlement, the fear. I get the fear, but you got to manage your fears and be an adult about it, and understand sort of where everything fits in. You can't expect, if you're going to marry, as an example, somebody who's much older and just is not going to continue to work, to turn over a significant part of the estate to you if you're much younger and don't know if the marriage will be of long duration. That's just an example. I have many such examples.
What's the craziest thing you've seen someone put in a prenup?
Well, I don't do lifestyle prenups.
Oh, okay.
So, taking out the garbage, having an affair, I don't do those. Mine are all financial. So nothing's crazy that I have seen, because I wouldn't be part of that. I want to make sure my clients can really deliver. That's the conversation that I have. If you're the payer, can you really deliver this? And God bless, you want to be generous, please be generous. I believe in that. Remember, I'm a romantic, but make sure that what you're committing to, you can deliver. Otherwise, it's going to be really bad. On the recipient spouse, can you live with this? Or are you going to feel less than, and the marriage is not going to be a happy marriage? Because you have to assume that this is the way the rules are going to be. If you split up by that D word, and you don't know what your spouse is going to do in the other D word.
When's the right time to have the prenup conversation in a relationship?
As soon as possible.
Mm.
Leaving it to the last minute, or in our world, the last minute is a few months. I don't think that's fair. Most people know that if you are dating somebody who comes from a very wealthy family, it's going to be expected. And if they don't process that, they're being a little naive. But even with that, what the terms might be, or how to go about it. And people who are getting married need to have financial discussions. It's hard, but you need to do that and make sure that you are aligned financially. If one person's a spender and one person is a complete saver, then that might not work unless the spender is willing to keep it in check and the saver is willing to give a little. But you got to work through that, or that's going to bring down your marriage.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask if you think that some couples maybe are incompatible financially.
Absolutely. And maybe that's another example of the couples where they love each other, but they just can't make it work. And it's better to find out now. I mean, I'm not Catholic, but to get married in the Catholic Church, you have to go through premarital counseling. I think that is terrific. Mm-hmm. And discuss the hard questions and discuss it with somebody who is there to help you and find out if you are compatible, because getting up in the same bed, paying the mortgage, raising kids is a lot different than going out, for dinner and to the movies and maybe on vacation. But if you don't get along on vacation, think about it.
I've seen some statistical evidence that it's predominantly women filing for divorce these days. What do you think is driving that?
I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's the case in California. I don't know if that's the case in other parts of the country. I believe that once women make a decision that they're done, it's really hard to change their mind. In my empirical study, generally what's the case is a woman will say, to her husband or wife, we're having problems, we need to go to therapy. And more often than not, this is a husband will say, it's not our problem, it's your problem. You want to go to therapy, you go to therapy. Not our problem, not my problem. The woman goes to therapy, takes back her power within herself, and comes to the conclusion, I'm done. Communicates that, and the husband is, oh my God, I'll stand on my head, I'll twinkle my toes, I'll do anything, I'll go to therapy, every day for 10 years, and then it's too late. Sometimes women also want to file even if they're not the one who made the decision, just to feel like they have a little more control. over the process. But sometimes people don't want to file because it's not my decision. I don't want the kids to think I did this. Let him file or let her file. So there are lots of different reasons. And sometimes, just going to a lawyer, people get sort of in the wheel of that process and they start filing. And certainly if there's domestic violence, there's a reason to proceed quickly.
Of course. And if someone knows that they're interested in getting a divorce, they've kind of made that decision. It's in their heart that they want to do it. What should they be doing ahead of filing to be prepared? Like what boxes need to be checked so it goes as smooth as it can?
Have a good therapist. This is not an order priority. Have a good therapist. Don't flap your lips to everybody under the sun because they'll get back to your spouse on whatever you said. Pick a good lawyer, interview a few, or if you like the first one you meet really like, then stick with that, or interview. Start copying documents. Depending on the circumstances, get your phone and your computer scanned, copy the hard drive, depending on what's there. You have access to bills, to life insurance policies, credit card statements, prenuptial agreement, postnuptial agreement, estate planning documents, schedules, things that reflect your expenses, QuickBooks, Quicken, anything you can get your hands on, copy. Don't take everything, copy it. Be organized. Talk to your lawyer about what you need to do. And if there's domestic violence, spend some time with your lawyer putting together a package to go to court to get some help.
If someone thinks their spouse is hiding financial assets, what do you do in that case? Do you hire an investigator or what's the protocol?
It sort of depends. We use forensic accountants that can see things that look untoward, but they don't do an audit. If you have money that's come out of a business and it wasn't deposited, okay, where did it go? But people think, if they put in the Cayman Islands, you can hire an investigator, and I've done that, but it's hard. You can follow the money. And crypto is hard. I work with special forensic accountants dealing with crypto. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Me too.
And it's, becoming a thing, a big thing. So you have to have experts who will help you put your sort of estate together and understand it and see where the money goes and what's income available to pay support and what the asset values are. It's a process and it's not overnight. And people think it's Perry Mason, that people confess on the stand and it's over in 30 minutes. It's not. This is a process and it takes a while to understand something. I read documents. It's not in 5 minutes. I really need to read and think about things.
What's the difference between a good divorce and a bad divorce?
A good divorce is, in my opinion, is when two people treat each other with respect. They stay out of the courtroom. They provide documents voluntarily to each other. They pick lawyers who are cooperative with each other. And more often than not, they sit down with a mediator. Generally, what I use is a retired judge, but it could be a practitioner as a mediator, to try to come up with a resolution if they can, like by doing settlement letters back and forth. But I find that sitting down for a day or 2 or 3 or 4 is much more productive than sending 30-page letters back and forth with a settlement offer. It's talk it through. If one person feels strongly about something and the other about something else, okay, try to work out a compromise. And if you can't, then you have to go to court, but you could do it with respect and keep your kids out of it. Do your best to come up with a schedule that is best for them under their circumstances. Do they have special needs? Does going back and forth between households wreak havoc on a child with ADHD who needs, consistency and structure? Share clothes. If a child forgets something at your house, help. drop it off. Just talk to your erstwhile ex. Rely on each other, help each other. You're there for each other. You're the parents' kids. That's a good divorce.
What chunk of these divorces get resolved in mediation, and how many typically end up in court?
Well, that's actually a misnomer of a question. Let me explain why. You can settle a case just back and forth or in mediation and have been to court 30 times. But ultimately it settles. Or you can go to court and then have interim resolution and then end up in court again. The statistics that are used pretty regularly is 90-something% of cases settle, but that does not explain if there was court along the way. And sometimes, sadly, you can resolve a case in mediation, but for some reason it doesn't hold. There's something that wasn't disclosed, or somebody feels they didn't have their day in court, or they were pushed into it, a whole host of reasons. And then there's a lot of post-judgment, as the mediation agreement goes into a judgment, post-judgment litigation. So that happens too. But most cases eventually settle. My goal, though, is never to see the inside of the courtroom for most of my cases. From an intellectual standpoint, I loved being involved in court periodically. I think it's fun, it's interesting, it keeps me on my toes, I learn a lot. But for the most part, it's not good for a family.
What's the pettiest thing you've seen people fighting over in a divorce?
I don't remember a specific, but I can tell you a line I use regularly, which is, I didn't go to law school to fight about the pots and pans or the vacuum cleaner. I'll buy you a new vacuum cleaner. We're not here to fight about the vacuum cleaner. I remember one case, I spent an entire day, an hour away from my home, with a retired judge making decisions, and with the other side and both parties deciding who got the dining room chairs and who got the table and who got this silver. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. I'm still very close to my client. It was horrible. And the husband wasn't going to use any of this stuff. But it was, his lawyer was the one who was like gung-ho, and he was like la-di-da, but her gung-ho took over. It was horrible. And I really don't want clients to spend that kind of money on that. You can buy a whole new dining room table.
Yeah, I would imagine the time that you're charging them for to fight over those things is definitely more costly than whatever the things are, at which point it becomes kind of evident that they're just going tit for tat, not because of necessarily the actual tangible item in front of them, but because they're now in this like revenge mindset.
I agree. And they want to be in control, hence the name of my book. But, control comes in different places. Having control of yourself and walking away. Like, I'm not doing this. And that doesn't mean walk away from what your rights are, etc. But you got to prioritize your life. And fighting to fight, not healthy. Fighting to teach a lesson, I get that all the time. She or he needs to be taught a lesson. No, we're not here to teach lessons. We're here to try to resolve this with as little pain as possible.
It's one thing when it's your client who's kind of out for blood, out for revenge, and I can see how it would be really effective for you to talk them down from it. What do you do when it's your client who's on the receiving end of the vengeful spouse? Like, how do you handle that?
Try to support them and explain where it's coming from, and it's not them. Try to be their, armed protector, gladiator, so that they are not, mowed to the ground. But then to step back and say, okay, what's important to you? Is this really important? At the same time, clients say this to me all the time. You need to protect me from myself. Okay. I don't think you should walk away from this. And clients sometimes do. And sometimes, as one of my colleagues always said, Stace, you can't stop a train wreck. Well, like, I can resolve this case. If only people would be reasonable. We can give it another shot. No, Stace, they just want to go at each other, and you can't stop a train wreck. And he's right. But I don't give up easily.
I like the phrasing that it's a train wreck, but that you can't stop it. I mean, when people are in that, have you seen it successfully work to like talk someone out of that? I know you're saying you can't stop it, but I want to be optimistic.
Oh, I absolutely try. And sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. And sometimes if they're not willing to listen and we're just materially different on how we look at things, then I will fire the client. I'm not going to go to court for something that I think, especially for children, I will not take a position I think that's harmful to a child. I may be wrong, but consciously, I won't do that. And I have the luxury of making those decisions. Kids didn't choose this. They don't need to be the collateral damage. I want to protect them as much as possible. And I'm very clear with clients about that. And I fire clients.
You hope that at the end of the day, they figure it out, because I imagine they're kind of having those experiences shopping around for other attorneys too. And when someone is in that rage state and they just can't see past it, I think that they also can't zoom out and see that they're the common denominator either.
Correct. And I know that ultimately they're going to go from lawyer to lawyer. Their divorce literally will go on for years and figuratively will go on for years. How many times have you met somebody or had dinner with somebody and they're talking about their no good Nick ex-wife or ex-husband, and you think they're going through a divorce, and you find out they've been divorced for 20 years, but they haven't been able to let go? Not healthy. And I see that happening. I've also, in cases where I've taken over and after a trial, really bad things have gone on, and said to the other side, there are children here. I understand why your client's upset, but if they don't figure this out and co-parent, these kids will be a mess. This is what happens to kids, young teenagers, when their parents are at war and they're in the middle of it. They will get depressed, they will get anxious, they will do drugs, they will get pregnant, they will drink, all these things. And most people don't listen when I say that, but I try, because I know what's going to happen. I work a lot with therapists. I'm pretty attuned to that. And kids come first in my book.
As they should. It's good that you're watching out for them. I'm myself, I'm a child of divorce, but it was really easy for my parents. There was just like no question that I wasn't going to go live with my dad. He just wasn't situated. But I remember like really clinging on to the movie Mrs. Doubtfire, because I was a child when that came out and it felt so resonant for me. And I'm curious what your thoughts are of it, because now that I look back as a child, I go, oh, this guy didn't get custody of his kids because he threw a party and wasn't super stable at work. Is that valid?
Oh, well, that's a gross generalization to make a point. Yes, you want kids to be in a structured enough household so their homework gets done, they go to sleep at a reasonable hour, there's food on the table, there's an adult home when they get home, as much as one can be. And in that case, the wife was pretty nasty, and the husband, Robin Williams, needed to get his act together. And he eventually got his act together. So for you, did you get to have a relationship with your dad, even if it wasn't day to day?
Yeah, I did. And thinking back, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed, I probably would have had more negative feelings about it if I had been forced to go to his house.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's positive.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody ask you what you wanted, and how old were you?
So actually they got divorced twice, which maybe you've seen these kinds of things happen. But our backstory is that we're from Ukraine and I was born there. And the first time that they got divorced, I was probably around 3-ish, maybe. But the ball had already started rolling on the immigration process. So they saw it to be beneficial to stay together just to like get the immigration over with, get them both out here, get situated in the States. And then later they kind of came around to realizing how incompatible they were. And I was probably 10 or 11 when the final divorce happened. And nobody really asked me then, but I think it kind of just ended up being the way that I probably would have wanted it. I don't imagine that preteen me would have wanted to go stay with my dad at his 1-bedroom apartment and be pulled out of school and any of that.
Are you the only child of that relationship?
I am.
Children should not be asked in a way that makes them feel like they have to choose, but there are ways of getting information, knowing where a kid belongs and why. When you say to ask questions of a child can say, oh, I want to stay at my mom's. Well, why? Well, because I don't have a curfew and I can watch TV all night and she lets me have my boyfriend stay over, age 12. Not happening. So kids' responses and reasons have to be reasonable because they need the structure. If your dad could have afforded a 2-bedroom, I would have jumped all over him. You do not get a 1-bedroom. You get a 2-bedroom unless you can't afford it because you need to have a place for your daughter to stay that's private for her. But sometimes people don't think in those terms. And, so you probably made the right choice, or your mom and dad did, but it's important to be able to get to know your parents and look to them for whatever their strengths are. You can figure out their weaknesses, but in my experience, if you are taken away from a parent, then a child starts to fantasize what that parent was all about. That's not the reality. And that makes life hard, and it affects their future relationships.
Young as I was, I remember feeling relieved when they got divorced that second time because I had watched them not get along my entire childhood. And so I feel like I even probably encouraged them to get divorced at one point. So I'm curious if in the case where there's children involved, if it is sometimes just better to go ahead and get a divorce because you're setting an example for you don't want to set the example for that type of relationship for your children, like a loveless marriage.
I was literally working on an article yesterday on 2 extremes. Either you're fighting in front of your children, actually 3 extremes. There's domestic violence or alcoholism or addiction. And that to me, you do something. Or it's cold and there's no affection and there's no connection. Having children see a very unhealthy relationship in any of those 3 arenas, that's not good for a child. That's not a good role model. And sometimes when people who are not compatible end up in different households, they can end up being better friends and better co-parents. Sometimes not.
Have you seen anyone regret their divorce?
Yes.
What's that like?
I observed that more men find somebody more quickly and get remarried or in a long-term relationship. I'm trying to think. It is more often than not, I think the woman regrets it, but that may be being oversimplistic. Splitting up a family, realizing that their spouse was not so awful, or then seeing their spouse sort of pull it together for the next spouse. Like, why wasn't he willing to do that for me, as an example? So the decision to get divorced needs to be really thought out, not impulsively. And that's why you need a good therapist.
With all of the changes in society today and women being more financially independent and this kind of almost like come to Jesus moment of recognizing things like weaponized incompetence or just growing apart, even when there's no nefarious reason for the divorce, is marriage still legally worth it?
Oh, I absolutely believe so. Or I wouldn't be doing it again. And I know people say, oh, this piece of paper doesn't mean anything. It does. People act differently, and the laws protecting you or not protecting you.
No, I appreciate that you still have optimism because as someone who's likely seen the darkest sides of what happens when a marriage doesn't make it, that you still firmly believe in it, not just for yourself, but in general.
Yes, I do. I'm a big believer in it. And with this generation, many people are choosing not to get married, and it's sort of perplexing to me. But to each his own, and each generation is a little bit different. And the generation ahead of me, my parents' generation, couples didn't split up. Generally, the mom stayed home, could not financially afford, or she thought, to split up, so they stayed together in an unhappy marriage. And getting divorced back in the day was looked upon as something horrible. But I have a funny story. When I was a little girl, I had a friend. I was probably 6, 7, maybe 9 years old. And I would go over to her house and play like on Fridays. And her dad would come home in a overcoat, a briefcase, and a hat, as my father did. You know, I lived in New York City, it was cold. And he'd come in and kiss the kids, kiss his wife. He was a lawyer. She had another father who used to take us ice skating on Saturdays. And he wore a shearling jacket and a cowboy hat. And I can remember coming home one day. So I must have been at least 9 because where we were living, and said to my parents, I want 2 dads like Kathy has 2 dads. Because that's how I saw it. I adored my father. I wanted 2 fathers. She had 2 fathers. Why couldn't I have 2 fathers? I didn't understand what divorce was. My parents must have been horrified when I said that. And I vividly remember it. I remember they were lying on their bed and I came in and sort of plopped my arms down. So I sort of went body down on their bed and started to say this to them. Because I thought it was really cool that she had these two really cool dads. The one who was the lawyer was her stepfather. Took me a while to figure that out.
So divorce can be a good thing.
I do believe that. I think if you're in the 3 things, if there's domestic violence, alcoholism, or addiction, if there's if people are screaming and yelling at each other, or basically ignoring each other, and it's loveless, I think it is generally better off for kids not to be in that part. And I'd like to think that if each of the mom and dad finds somebody else, there may be 4 people or 3 people who will love these children. That's my romantic goal.
I love that. Well, Stacy Phillips, thank you so much for talking to me today. Please tell us where people can find your book and how they can learn more about you.
You can find the book online. It's you can look me up, Stacy D. Phillips, attorney. The book is Divorce, It's All About Control, How to Win the Emotional, Psychological, and Legal Wars. These days, I don't think it's in bookstores, but it's online. For many years, it was in bookstores. But I am doing a rewrite of the book, so we'll be back in bookstores. I'm a partner at Blank Rome. But if you look up Stacy D. Phillips as opposed to Stacy Phillips, there are Stacy Phillipses. One is a violinist. But if you just put Stacy Phillips lawyer or Beverly Hills. I was told recently by somebody, I looked up Stacy, divorce lawyer, Beverly Hills, and there I was. I had no clue. Not even a last name, just Stacy, divorce lawyer, Beverly Hills, which is interesting. So I'm pretty easy to find. Happy to help, whatever your needs are. And I'm part of a firm that has 700, 800 lawyers. So we do everything, not just divorce. We have a very large divorce practice across the country, the largest in the world. But we do so many other things. So I'm a really good resource.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk to me today.
Thank you. I love the name of your podcast, by the way.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening. Bye.